Hello. Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm Elisa Vitti, founder of Flow Living and the author of In the Flow and Woman Cove, which are behind me. I am the creator of the My Flow app and the creator of the cycle syncing method. So I'm here for my bi-monthly chat with you to talk about all that you need to know, how to make sense of your hormones and best strategies for biohacking them. And today we're going to be talking about overcoming infertility and ways to really biohack the process wherever you are in the process. If you are trying to conceive naturally right now, if you know you want to be pregnant in the future, but you aren't doing that yet, but you want to sort of get yourself organized and prepared as best as you can. If you're going through IVF or some other process, how can we use the functional nutrition approach to optimize the outcome of whatever it is that you're doing and enhance it? Because the science really is clear, studies really are clear that the more you adjust your inputs with diet and supplements and a whole bunch of other lifestyle factors, that you really can have an enormous positive impact on your fertile factors. And of course, I'm sharing best practices from my own experience, but also having had the honor and privilege of really helping countless women now become mothers. And so I want to share with you, wherever you are in your journey. um, I know how hard it can feel, and how stressful it can be, but at the same time, there are things that you can do. And that is part of the process of, I think, helping our hearts go through these difficult things. So I wanted to kind of start with, you know, how to first look at um, what might be at the cause, or sort of like some things for you to avoid or be aware of when you're looking at your fertility as a whole, right? So we'll start with some of the things that you want to be aware of, and then we'll talk about some of the things you want to avoid to protect your fertility. But the first place, obviously, that you want to be looking to understand what the state of affairs are with your fertility is really your cycle, right? Your cycle is your fifth vital sign. So, what is going on with your period, right? It's the best indicator of your fertility status: consistency, color, length, intensity, symptom burden. All of these things really let us know what's going on for you. So, for example, let's say you have irregular cycles, right? That could be due to lack of ovulation, issues with your FSH levels. It could be due to progesterone insufficiency. Either way, that is not a recipe for conception success, right? If you aren't ovulating, you're not going to conceive. If you don't have enough progesterone, you might conceive but not maintain the pregnancy. So, really understanding what's going on is so important. So, right, tracking and monitoring these things is really, really critical. Um, I think the another thing to look at, is heavy bleeding, right? Estrogen dominance, those types of things. Any sort of symptom issues that you're having. Severe PMS is another indicator of insufficient progesterone. And that's going to just make it hard for you, again, to hold on to that pregnancy. I think you also want to take a look at, you know, some of the factors that have gone into your cycle. For example, have you been on synthetic birth control for long periods of time, right? And if so, what have you done to address the um, the micronutrient deficiency there? Are you micronutrient depleted in general? Right, some things to think about. Um, are there any gut problems that you've had? Have you been on extended forms of medication for other issues, antibiotics? Um, Have you been exposed to lots of pesticides in foods or in your environment? Anything that's going to be long-term disruptive to your endocrine system. Do you have other existing, imbalances like in thyroid or Hashimoto's or things of that nature, right? And then of course there's PCOS and some of the other metabolic issues that go along with that, with insulin and how that affects your fertility. And then there are things like endometriosis, adenomyosis, fibroids, physical reasons, structural reasons, let's say within the uterus, that things can be very difficult. So you got to sort of take stock of all of that. And when it comes to, let's say, the PMS, the cycle irregularity, the heavy bleeding or the short bleeding, the good news there is that there's a ton you can do to correct that pretty quickly and restore a healthy cycle. Your cycle is extremely responsive to dietary and supplement changes. If it's environmental factors, toxic chemicals, alcohol, caffeine intake, pesticide exposure, that too can be a whole category of things that you address. And then the third, if there's any structural issues like fibroids, endo, et cetera, then you can work with a medical professional to help clear those blockages um, in some temporary fashion so that you can, time a conception. So that's sort of the high level, first piece that I like women to kind of look at is, get real with your period, deal with the symptoms, right? And we'll dive into that a little bit more. Go green, make sure that you are cleaning up your act with chemicals, buy organic. If you're on the pill and you're thinking, gee, I'd like to safeguard my fertility for the future, I would really have you do a deep, serious investigation into all the things that the pill is doing to you, so that you're fully aware of the choices that you're making and any potential consequences that could affect your future fertility. You can learn about that in so many different places on our blog, on other experts' blogs. Just make sure that you get all the information, because I hear time and time again, oh, if I had only known, I would have gotten off the pill, sooner. I would never have gone on it in the first place. And if you're just using it to prevent pregnancy, then there are so many other ways to do that without taking synthetic hormones. And if you're using it to deal with the period problem, now is the time. If you're not yet trying to conceive and you're on the pill and you're thinking, well, okay, 5 years from now, I want to have a baby. Now is the time to deal with that issue, getting, not using that medication, but really figuring out how to fix your cycle issues naturally so that you're really actually getting yourself to a place of fertility. Because whatever reason you're on the pill for, if it's a menstrual issue like PCOS or cramps or heavy bleeding, those things are going to become obstacles to your fertility journey. So don't wait until you're ready to try to have a baby to deal with those. Time is on your side now. So deal with them now. And then when you're ready to have a baby, it can be a much more pleasurable process. Let's talk a little bit about general foods to incorporate into your diet. And then we'll talk a little bit about supplements. And then we'll talk a little bit about how to biohack, let's say, an IVF process, because you can make a baby so many ways. They're all equally good. And however you do it, I want you to do it the healthiest way possible for you, which is the least amount of interventions. But some interventions are necessary, and that is okay. But you can still navigate the process with a lot of good natural inputs. So let's start with some fertility power foods, right? And these are all studied, evidence backed, research backed. Avocado. One avocado a day when you're trying to conceive, because of their monounsaturated fats. They really boost egg quality. So that's a great thing. You don't have to do a whole avocado, even half an avocado is fine, or a quarter, just whatever feels good to you, but certainly daily. Royal jelly. A 2007 Japanese study discovered that royal jelly is similar to a phytoestrogen and contains properties that actually support healthy uterine muscles and lining. And there have been multiple studies with royal jelly on fertility in animals that suggest it has the potential to increase rates of pregnancy and support fertility overall. You can put it in a smoothie. It's really easy to to use. Turmeric can improve circulation to all of your organs and reduce inflammation. And for women with PCOS, help with inflammation and blood sugar stability. So this, of course, is helpful to the uterus and the ovaries. The more oxygenation, it can also help with regulation of periods and all of that. Cinnamon, another spice to help stabilize your blood sugar. Leafy greens containing all that healthy folate and magnesium. Egg yolks, for their vitamin D3 content. Healthful in terms of what you need to boost your fertility. And why vitamin D3? Um, Here's a fun fact: 93% of all idiopathic infertility, meaning infertility with no known cause, nothing obvious, actually has a vitamin D3 deficiency in common. So it could just be, and this is what I mean, changing your dietary inputs is so critical for this. Some things to avoid: caffeine. Caffeine, even just a couple of cups of coffee a day for men and women can actually increase um, miscarriage rates. So you definitely don't want to be doing that at all if you are um, trying to conceive or using IVF. You want to like really boost your chances, especially if you're doing that. You want to, definitely balance your complex carbohydrates and skip the sugar so that you're really optimizing that insulin, cortisol, progesterone conversation that really boosts ovulation and signals to your body that everything is in a good place for that. Um, what else do I like from a food point of view? I think, um, yeah, those are good. I mean, you can, protein and fats really are key, and then all the other specialty foods that I mentioned. But proteins contain amino acids to make hormones. Fats are critical for your hormones. If you're not eating a diet that are rich in those things, your fertility is going to be a little bit more, let's say, suboptimal. And if you have a history of dieting, right, that's another audit piece to consider. Do you have a history of extreme dieting? Have you gotten on the intermittent fasting bandwagon? Where are you with all of the wellness trends that, if you've been following me or if you've read In the Flow, have no benefit for women in their reproductive years and actually can damage our hormonal cycle and our fertility. How many of those things have you done? And if so, the best place to start in terms of figuring out, well, how do I want to really retool my diet such that I can optimize my fertility every single day. Well, the best place to start is the cycle syncing method outlined in the book In the Flow. You can learn more about that at cyclesyncingmembership.com. You can download the MyFlow app. All of those places are things that I've created to help you understand how do you use food in each phase of your cycle such that you can optimize the hormonal ratio in each phase, support estrogen metabolism, boost progesterone levels, promote regular ovulation, promote a healthy luteal phase, all the things that you need. And the cycle syncing method is a great tool to support you during the IVF process, especially so that you don't have to do some of the things that are in a sort of, let's say, full IVF cycle. I'll talk more about that in a minute. Let's talk a little bit about supplements. I mentioned D3, I mentioned magnesium, probiotics are essential. Zinc deficiency is an important thing to consider. B6, really important to help you boost your progesterone levels. What else do I like? Oh, I think that there's an unsung hero in the form of melatonin. Melatonin in a very low dose, like 3 milligrams, has been studied since the mid 90s, actually, when IVF was being sort of invented in Europe. There was a ton of research on how do we restart ovarian function in women, for example, who are postmenopausal. And a doctor by the name of Dr. Walter Pierpaoli, he discovered that taking a combination of melatonin, selenium, and zinc in very low doses could actually restart ovulation in a postmenopausal woman. So fascinating. And it has to do with the way melatonin is produced less as we age, and there's a relationship between melatonin, the pituitary gland, and follicular stimulating hormone, of course, with ovulation being governed by that. So it's really an important thing to consider, especially if you're over 35. How is your sleep? Are you are do you feel like you're aging prematurely from a hormonal point of view? Is your skin and hair dry? Are you having less lubrication during the wet phases of your cycle? Do you feel less desire for intimacy? All of these things would indicate that you're moving too quickly through the perimenopausal journey. And what does that mean from a hormonal level? It means rising FSH levels, which shut off ovulation. So we need to protect that. Cycle syncing your food and your exercise is the foundation. Supplements are critical. And I think melatonin has an important role to play for women over 35. To help the pituitary gland. I think Vitex can be helpful as well, by indirectly helping with progesterone production. So that's a very well studied herb that's documented for, I don't know, the entirety of women's health, that it's been used for centuries. Very safe. Now, of course, once you are to get pregnant, right, you wouldn't actually stay on the Vitex or the melatonin, just to be clear. Other supplements that I think can be really helpful, if you're concerned about egg quality, studies show that taking 600 micrograms of coenzyme Q10 a day, you and your partner can boost both egg and sperm quality if you have a male partner. And that's a really great thing that you can do for 3 to 6 months before you try to conceive, either naturally or using an IVF cycle, especially if you're over 35, right? And I think that that's the thing. So many women are having their first. I mean, my experience with pregnancy was at 30. I think I conceived at 36, and I gave birth at 37. And so, you know, being over 35 has some special considerations. At the same time, it doesn't necessarily mean what all sort of like all the negative hype that you hear about geriatric, you're sort of in a geriatric reproductive state. You know, technically you're at the sort of other half of things, but so many women now are having children 35 to 47. So it's not as unusual. And in fact, keep in mind, many, many moons ago, before the advent of birth control, women, the reason why it was such a godsend to women was because women were having their like sixth or seventh or eighth child well into their late 40s, and, was very taxing on them having had so many children already. So it is totally possible to conceive at any age. I think it's really about what steps can you take to slow down your hormonal biological age, right? Which really comes down to inflammation, micronutrient levels as a whole, and how well your inflammation, micronutrient levels, and sort of how well your cycle is working, like that FSH level, right? Because you've got to ovulate. So if you can work on these things, then let's say you go in to be evaluated and you're 40, you could come back with lab work indicating that your hormones are in the range of somebody who's like 35 or younger. And so you're in a different situation, right? Because let's say you are choosing to do a round of IVF, right? Well, you could do a natural cycle IVF. You could not, let's say, use birth control to shut off your cycle, and then you could do more natural cycle IVF because your cycle is functioning so well. When you're ovulating. You don't have to use synthetic estrogen to thicken the lining of your uterus because you have an abundant lining, because you're taking care of yourself, right? And inflammation markers are low, your immune system is functioning properly. So if you have a transfer of the embryo, everything is going to be lined up for that to be as successful as it can be, right? There will be You want to just remove all the obstacles, right? So whether you're using artificial reproductive technology, whether you're doing it naturally, you still have to remove the same obstacles. And I think that that's the thing. We just sort of have been instilled with all this fear from a young age that you can get pregnant at any time. Well, A, that's not true. As some of you know, the egg is only viable for such a short moment. But you have to sort of protect your hormone levels. You have to slow down biological aging from a hormonal point of view. You have to keep your micronutrient levels. You have to be in an abundant state of micronutrient levels to 3D print a tiny human being, right? That's the preferred situation for the body, that you are rich with nutrients to make this new person. So if you're depleted, this could be secondary infertility that you're dealing with. So you had your first child and now you're having secondary infertility. Well, how did you recover postpartum? Did you ever give yourself the right replenishment? We think that it's supposed to just happen and that we don't have a role to play, but everything is connected. And so if you're depleted, if you're stressed, if you've gone through major life stresses, if you've had miscarriages and haven't recovered from those with micronutrient support and emotional support, it all factors into what what you have to sort of get through to get pregnant. And so it's not meant to be overwhelming. It's meant to be more systematic. Like, let's think about it as, how does this system work? How does the endocrine system work? And what do I have to do to support it? So let's do a little quick rundown, right? Endocrine system safeguards the transport of glucose to the brain, heart, and muscle tissue. That is what it needs to do every day, all day. Hormones are a chemical messenger and they do a lot of other things, but if you interrupt the blood sugar conversation, the rest of the conversation cannot happen. So even just if you want to improve your fertility, just improving your blood sugar levels is going to be a dramatic fertile factor improvement for you. Then there's the stress piece. Cortisol, we know, has detrimental effects on ovulation regularity and progesterone levels. So what can you do to start mitigating your stress levels? You don't need me to tell you, there's a myriad of wellness blogs out there about blue light blocking glasses and meditation and sleep hygiene, but you got to do it, you know, which is the hard part, especially if you already have another kid, right? So what can you do? And then there's, estrogen elimination, making sure you're making enough progesterone. So that's where the cycle syncing diet and fitness comes in, because that's really going to help you balance that out every day. And then there's micronutrients, right? You've got to put more of those things in so that, when you're really able to go the distance. Um, what else can I say about this process? Um, I think that I think that we should feel a lot more like, okay, I'm about to start to make a baby. I want to do this. What are all the steps that I need to take, as opposed to, let's just try and see what happens. I think, if you're interested in biohacking, you kind of want to map out a plan. And that to me involves those steps that we just talked about, right? So blood sugar stability, the flow protocol, blood sugar stability, stress management, cycle syncing, your diet and fitness, and the right supplements. I want to make sure I covered all the supplements. We talked about coenzyme Q10, we talked about magnesium, we talked about B6, we talked about methylated folic acid. That's so important. Um, one more, I think, and we talked about melatonin. There's one more that I like to recommend for women, especially with PCOS, if you have irregular ovulation, is uh, myo-inositol. That has excellent studies associated with, improving ovulatory performance and even helping with getting ovulation started in a woman who has been anovulatory. So I have a question here, and feel free to drop in your questions into the chat from RA. So it's possible to improve egg quality and quantity as we get older. So that's interesting too. Yes, quality for sure, and quantity. So there was this theory that you're born with a certain number of eggs, and then they sort of deciduously like die off as you get older, and that's it. You run out of eggs. But they just discovered, found this study a couple of weeks ago, that there are, stem cell activity in the ovary, that the ovary is able to generate eggs all the time. Of course, nature would build it that way. So yeah, don't believe that rhetoric of like, oh, you run out of eggs. You don't. You know, I mean, now listen. What's more concerning than looking at those numbers of AMH levels is the most important level if you're trying to conceive is your FSH level. FSH, right? Follicular stimulating hormone. Um, if that gets above, like, let's say a 16, it's going to be tough to ovulate on a regular basis. You want to keep that nice and low. And I really love the melatonin Vitex combination for that because it can really help after 35 when your body starts making less melatonin, right? I wouldn't do it before then. Um, Deborah, I don't have the name of the study off the top of my head, but I am happy to pull it and we'll write a blog article about it and post it because it is such big. It's sort of a big, you know, update to the narrative. Um, Coco the Nut. That's a great name. uh, does it make sense to be on melatonin, selenium, zinc if you're in your early 30s if you hope to have more kids later? Not necessarily. I think selenium and zinc is fine. Um, I think that melatonin is really, it depends. It depends. So if you are trying to conceive, and let's say that's now or within the next 6 months, then I think, yes, that can be a boost for you. If you're over 35, then definitely. If you're under 35 and you have no plans in the next year to have a baby, I wouldn't necessarily put it in unless you're having some sort of like sleep issue and you cannot sleep and there's something that would indicate that your melatonin levels are off. I would first get organized on the sleep hygiene side of things, blue light blocking glasses. Funny thing, this drives me crazy. I don't know why I can't buy regular light bulbs anymore. Everywhere you go, it's LED light bulbs. LED light bulbs are the same. It's the same kind of light that's coming out of all your devices, and it's full of this blue light that really disrupts your circadian rhythm. It's terrible. I know that there is a company. I just found out that there's a company that makes some form of LED lighting that has removed the blue light, which was developed by NASA, by the way, because this is such a problem when you go into space, right, where there's not the regular circadian cues with sunlight and darkness, and then you're inside a shuttle and it's all strange lighting, especially the blue lighting. And so people were, developing all sorts of issues from that. And so they developed this way to create LED lighting without the blue light. So they're trying to make that available to the consumer. But I'm telling you, um, I think that kind of light pollution is really not helpful for women and their fertility journey. Um, okay, some other questions. I could go on and on, but anyway, sorry, Coco the Nut, like sleep hygiene, right? Try to reduce your blue in your early 30s, don't stay away from alcohol, get off the caffeine, take away the things that deplete you of micronutrients, do the right focus on cycle syncing, focus on take the balanced supplements to keep your micronutrient levels where they should be. Use the cycle syncing supplements to support your cycle. That's really, if you're not trying to have kids right now, that's what I would have you do, right? Just use the cycle syncing diet and life and fitness. Take these 2 supplement kits. That's why I formulated them. So that's your sort of insurance policy for when you're ready. And then when you're ready, you can, for 6 months, take a whole bunch of key supplements that will kind of boost your fertile factors and prepare your body extra on top of the wonderful foundation that you've taken care of for, let's say, the 4 or 5 years that you're not, from, let's say, today to when you want to have children, right? So that's kind of how I would think of it in that way. Imani, how long does it take for the body to replenish in micronutrients? It's a great question. It depends on so many things, like how depleted are you? Did you diet for 10 years? Were you on the pill for 10 years? Do you have a lot of stress? Do you drink a lot of caffeine and alcohol? Are you on any other medications? All of those things are a problem, right? And so they will just make it take a little bit longer for you to replenish, but you will feel it when you replenish. I remember when, before I got pregnant, um, I felt and looked ripe, ripe, full of nutrients. Like, I was at a wedding, a friend's wedding with my husband. This strange woman who I had never met before, she came up to me and she said, "You're going to get pregnant." And, she's like, "Look at you, you're glowing." And I was like, and it's funny because I was very moved when she said that, because I could feel that my body was really ready and really ripe with things. And so you will feel an abundance of energy. Your skin will be glowing, your hair will be shiny, your nails will be strong, you full of energy, mental clarity. You're going to feel good. That's when you're full, you're sort of at the right level with your micronutrients. But it takes some time. And I'm somebody who was put on antibiotics forever as a kid, and my gut was destroyed, and I had so many hormonal problems, and it took a long time to get myself where I wanted to be. And what was a long time? And I had to do it all by trial and error. I didn't have all these wonderful things that I've built for you to make it go faster. But, I think it took me a good solid, 2 years of really dedicated, support to get myself back on track. But I've been ovulating and menstruating regularly ever since. And so that's a really important thing. So, um, let's see more questions. What's the amount of Vitex that you should take with the melatonin? So melatonin is 3 milligrams at night. Vitex, I recommend. I really like Gaia, Gaia herbals. They're the best, highest quality herbal formulations you can find anywhere. Um, and I would just get their Vitex product and take it as instructed. I think it's 2 pills in the morning. That is They're just excellent. I feel very happy to recommend that brand to you. Um, okay, Caitlin, you just found out you have PCOS, age 29. Should you start taking Vitex? Not necessarily, Caitlin. You should start taking myo-inositol. You should get on the balance supplements. We need to restore your cycle. And Vitex wouldn't be the first place I would go. I would, work on blood sugar stability, doing the right foods to reduce the insulin spike, and myo-inositol to help your ovulatory process move in the right direction. Lizana, can high FSH be lowered after 40? Absolutely. I remember working with a woman who was 43 trying to conceive. She had gone in for some testing and she had FSH levels over 16. We changed her diet, we did the supplements, and then it was down to a 6 in about 3 months. So this is what I mean. Your body, your endocrine system is entirely responsive to the inputs that you put in. If you put in good things, then it can work more easily, can do its job more easily. I mean, think about it. I'm trying to give like an analogy. You know those conveyor belts at the grocery store? This probably is a terrible analogy. I'm just trying to think of something quickly. If you put the little divider thing and then you start loading up all the things on the conveyor belt, and like, it won't move. I'm terrible sometimes at coming up with analogies, forgive me, but it's similar. If you load up your body with junk foods, and I don't mean actual junk food, I just mean foods that are low quality, full of pesticides, high in simple carbohydrates, artificial sweeteners, stay away from them. Um, all of that stuff. Oh, and bad news. I don't know enough what the if no one does. I'm going to be looking into it more, but xanthan gum, which is in every single gluten-free product, darn it, has now been shown to alter the gut microbiome. And they don't exactly know how, and they don't know what the long-term effects are. So that's a big bummer because that you don't want to have happen. So, limit your pre-packaged gluten-free foods. I'm now going to be switching to finding ways to use a gluten-free flour that doesn't have xanthan gum, or making my own blend. On special occasions, if you want to make a birthday cake with those things, it's okay. But I'm saying for your everyday, right, you want to limit that stuff too. And take a good probiotic. But there is one in the balance supplements. This is why I formulated balance, because I know that there are certain micronutrients that every single woman's endocrine system has to have. I put them all in here, and you can't fit them all in one pill because sometimes they can block each other. You can't take them all at the same time. That's why, I can appreciate how confusing it is, because there are all these like one pill to solve all your problems kind of things out there. But I don't know how that's possible, right? Then the cycle syncing supplement kit is very special because it's, certain micronutrients for each phase of the cycle. And that's really unique. It's the only product like that in the market. So I would highly encourage you to do both. There are no overlapping ingredients. Really, really great. Cocoa the nut. You also started seed cycling and doing a lot of woman code stuff in January, and your last 3 periods have been exactly 30 days, ovulating on day 17 on the dot. Exactly, my friend. It's not like, wow, this is the funny thing. Everybody has this experience of like, I can't believe it. I can't believe that this is happening. Believe it, because this is how the body works. And if you give it the things that it needs to do its job, it will perform beautifully for you. If you interrupt it constantly from having the right raw materials to do its job, it's not going to be able to perform. It's going to have problems and symptoms and missing periods, missing ovulation, and all of that. So that's kind of an important thing. Deborah, you can reach out to support@flowliving.com, and they can help you with international shipping so that you can get them. I just want to talk a little bit about miscarriages in the fertility journey, because it's, I think, really under discussed. I know there's less taboo about talking about it now, and I think that's really good. But I just feel like we don't have sort of a conversation about how do you biohack that process after it happens, right? How do you restore yourself? How do you recover? What do you do to recover? I mean, there's this whole emotional piece, and I really actually really, really love the Japanese rituals post miscarriage. And you can look this up. It was written up in the New York Times by a woman who had a miscarriage, and I thought it was just so perfect. I recommend it to women all the time. You place a stone in your yard or in your home somewhere, and it's a way to externalize the loss of something, of a person, and to have a little memorial. Or you can do a little ceremony at the ocean, or just, you have to emotionally address the fact that 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 happened, and it is so upsetting. It's so upsetting when it happens, and you need to give yourself space and time to grieve, and to be frustrated, and to be sad, and to be hopeless, and all the miserable appropriate feelings, right? And at the same time, you want to take care of your body, who is also going through it, right? So your heart's going through it, your mind is going through it, and then your physical body is going through it. And how can you do that? How do you navigate that? Well, very similarly to the things that we're talking about, but in a more specific way. So immediately following um, a so I'll talk about this and then I'll talk about if you're doing IVF, some hacks around the whole process, okay? Um, Immediately after you have your miscarriage, right? You want to operate as if you are in a menstrual phase, right? So you want to eat lots of iron rich foods and nutrient dense foods. This is the time to eat steaks and beef stew and anything that's going to really replenish you and nourish you. Nothing cold. This is not a time for smoothies or ice cream or anything cold. It's very similar to the postpartum protocol that you would use, right? You haven't looked at like the first 40 days. In fact, I think that's a great cookbook to use post miscarriage. You know, they make a seaweed soup in Korea that is given postpartum, but I think it would be equally appropriate post miscarriage. And I don't care if the miscarriage was, you know, 1 month in, 3 months in, it's all lot on your body because your body was starting a whole process of pregnancy and now those hormones are receding and you have to support yourself and then rest, lots and lots of rest, lots and lots of micronutrients, right? So you can keep taking your prenatals, keep taking your probiotics, and then eating deeply nourishing foods, root vegetables, animal proteins, warming spices. Doesn't have to be hot and spicy food, but can be cinnamon, turmeric, ginger, especially ginger, miso soup, all of that for, you know, you'll know depending on how long you were pregnant for, a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, just depends on where you're at. You will feel when you're less cold and um, delicate, and you'll feel like you're more robust and ready to move on from that food piece. But I would keep doing lots and lots of micronutrients. I would eat liver pate. I mean, organ meats especially can be really helpful postpartum and post miscarriage. So it's really important. Don't abandon your body in that moment. Really make sure that you take the supplements and take time because obviously, if you're trying to conceive and you've had a miscarriage, you are going to want to try again. And you've already been through enough having had to have the miscarriage. So give yourself that help and that support so that when you are emotionally ready to try again, your body's also there ready, replenished, and able to take on trying again too, right? Because it's a journey together. Your heart, your mind, and your body all have to kind of get back to a place where you're ready to try. So I hope that's a helpful conversation because um, we're starting to talk about miscarriage in our culture, but it's still not, I like to offer something very tangible and practical, like, boots on the ground when it's happening to you. What do you do? Because talking about it in this uncomfortable way about, that it's sad is fine, but I want you to have tools to move forward. It's just so important. Um, so that's that. Let's talk a little bit about some IVF hacks that I've recommended over the years that are really successful. So, a couple things, like I mentioned earlier, always, depending on where you're at and your age and your insurance situation, how many opportunities you will have to try. I'm of the opinion that it's like the salt method, right? You can always add more salt. You can always add more medication interventions. But if you really dedicate and invest 6 months before you start an IVF journey to doing the things that I talk about with cycle syncing and micronutrient replenishment and really getting your hormones functioning optimally. And then you go and you have your tests. The tests are going to show you your FSH levels are good, your estrogen and progesterone levels are good, and you're going to be in a position where you don't have to do a full IVF cycle. The full IVF cycle requires you to shut off your cycle taking birth control pills, which makes no sense if you have a healthy cycle, right? And then it has you taking all sorts of medications and injections, and then all sorts of and estrogen to beef up the lining of your uterus and all of that, right? So I think it's um, useful to prepare yourself so that you will have some options and you can talk to your reproductive endocrinologist about how you might want to do a natural cycle IVF where you don't take birth control to start, you monitor your ovulation, maybe you do a little Clomid to boost the number of eggs, maybe you do a little bit of an injection just to see how many days the eggs can mature, and then you do the HCG trigger and you go for the transfer. And maybe you don't get 25 eggs, but you know, you only need one good embryo and you need that to implant, right? And so that's a benefit not only for you in terms of how you're going to feel going through the process, less medication, less side effects while you're going through it, but also you're removing fewer eggs from your ovary, which people should be aware that the more you take out, the you actually can land in your postmenopausal years 2 to 3 years earlier if you do a lot of aggressive IVF, which I don't think women are fully aware of. So you can do a more gentle approach. If you already have a beautifully plump lining of the uterus, you don't need to do any estrogen. And then you can go for the transfer. I definitely recommend 100% doing acupuncture, as much as you'd like through the process. But if you can't, for some reason, right before the transfer and right after. It doesn't have to be in the same building, although that's super convenient, but right before, right after, profoundly, the studies very conclusive that that is beneficial because it enhances blood flow and circulation to the uterus, can really support the implantation process. Um, and then you will, I'll be putting out a blog article about this soon, but there are some things that, are a little bit outdated with the whole, transfer process. So you can also talk with your doctor about some of those things. How much medication do you want to take at that time? Because what's happening between the embryo and the uterine lining is a very special immunological response. And as long as your immune system is healthy and good, and you don't have an autoimmune issue, or you don't have some sort of other situation happening in the uterus that would require you taking some steroids or things to tamp down an immune response. If your immune response is normal and healthy, you may not want to take those things. You may want to interfere less with the process, especially if you've had experience getting pregnant before naturally, but you've had other issues that have led you to have to do IVF, which is perfectly fine. You can start to have some um, leverage about what you want to try, especially the more you prepare yourself, the more you take care of your cycle, the more the labs show that all is well. That, you just, whatever little help you need, if it's to select the right embryo or whatnot. But if the hormones are good, you need less hormonal intervention, and that then is good for you, makes it easier on you as the process, and then can be great because it might also be something that helps you with the transfer success as well, because your body is really ready and hormonally ready to receive that embryo. So those are some little bit of like the hacks that I've shared with women over the years of doing their IVF process and doing that successfully. It's a privilege to have helped so many women become mothers, especially during Infertility Awareness Week this week. That I think there's just so much more that we can do. And of course, this is the same thing I have been saying all along. There's so much more you can do to fix your period than you've been told you can do. It's not a curse, and you're not stuck with the problems. There's so much you can do to take charge of your fertility and really support it today and right before you try, whether you try naturally or you have to use IVF. It's okay if you do. Just do the same prep work because it's going to pay dividends, meaning you could do it one time, one IVF cycle, one transfer, and then you're pregnant, right? Instead of many, many rounds. Um, and it's the same thing with perimenopause, right? We just think this is an inevitable process of getting older and hot flashes and night sweats, and there's nothing to be done. And that the best you can do is kind of wait till you're at the age where you can take hormone replacement therapy and get a prescription for estrogen and progesterone. that isn't true either, right? There's so much you can do to biohack perimenopause so that you age better from a hormonal point of view. So, I'm like a broken record. I'm always saying that you can roll up your sleeves and get in there with your hormones by changing your dietary lifestyle and micronutrient inputs and really create dramatically better results for yourself. You don't have to sit and suffer. And when it comes to fertility, you can take charge, you can be proactive, and you can have the outcomes that you want, even if it's a circuitous and stressful journey. If you stick with it, hopefully, and I'm hoping for all of you, you will have the outcomes that you want. So, my beautiful friends, today I'm wishing you lots of good, fertile energy on your journey. I'm sending you lots of good energy to your ovaries. And, if you have more questions or you want more individual support, please reach out to us at flowliving.com. You can set up a telehealth consult with one of our flow coaches, and we can guide you a little bit more on your process wherever you're at. And until next time, take really good care of yourself and your hormones. Share this with a friend, comment and like our channel, and I will talk to you another time. All right, everybody. Bye.